Sunday, millions of people will be tuning in to watch the Academy Awards, and an Oscar nomination can boost box office numbers. But what does that mean for a film's bottom line? Well, here to break it down for us is Edward Jay Epstein. Ed is the author of The Hollywood Economist, The Hidden Financial Reality Behind the Movies. Ed, it's such a pleasure to have you here. I know you've been on Bloomberg TV before, but let's talk about this a little bit. These top grossing films at the moment, I'm looking at the Oscar nominees. If we look at the top three, Toy Story 3, box office, these are gross receipts, over $400 million. Inception, close to $300 million. True Grit, about $165 million, plus or minus a few thousand there. Pretty impressive numbers, but you make an interesting case for why those numbers can be a little misleading.
Well, yes. You know, for one thing, the movies still make about 70% of their money, not from the American box office, but from world rights, including foreign television, which is getting more and more important, and DVDs, which are becoming less important. So take a movie like Toy Story 3. It's really done fabulously for Disney because of all the back-end sales. It's had tremendous DVD sales, tremendous merchandise, toys, licensing. These other movies won't equal that.
How much of a percentage do the actual box office numbers translate into the bottom line? So when I buy a ticket at an American theater, what does that mean to Disney if I go to Toy Story 3?
Well, the theaters keep half the money. The distributor, which, by the way, in this case is Disney, takes another, say, 30%. They deduct all the advertising, which on a movie like Toy Story 3 can be worldwide $120 million, is all deducted from the top out of cash. So in many movies, there's no money left over from the theatrical box office, and everything is the back end.
They're not getting any money from in many cases, but when do they hit that critical threshold? How much does a movie have to be making on that sort of box office gross receipts for them to be in the black?
A Hollywood movie has to show in box offices, American box office, at least $200 million to get into the black. Smaller movies like King's Speech, of course, have much lower budgets. They're not Hollywood movies. They have different economics. And so a number like $100 million will probably show a possible profit.
Which is roughly where that is right now. It's a little over $100 million. But let's talk about, you know, a movie like Winter's Bone. So far, it's generated about $6.5 million in sort of gross box office receipts. When does that become profitable?
There'll be no real profit. The profit will be to the people involved in it. They will be able to make other movies. Look, where the money really comes from is selling movies to paid television and cable television. Those rights are where the money is. And movies like Winter's Bone, or even King's Speech, and foreign movies just won't get into those rights at all.
Now let's talk a little bit about sort of movie streaming. I love it. I have Apple TV, I've got Netflix. What's interesting to me is that some movies are available early, some aren't. Like Winter's Bone, you can get through Apple TV at the moment. Inception has been around for a while. Do they try and time that around the release of the Oscars at all?
What the movie studios do is they have what's called an output deal, in which they take their entire production and sell it to a paid television network like HBO or Showtime. That ties it up basically for 2 to 3 years before you will ever be able to get it. Movies like Winter's Bone don't get these output deals, so you can get them from Netflix or from Apple TV or whatever, because they're not tied up. But if you're in the business, you want your movie to be tied up. Those profits are enormous from HBO or from another paid television network.
Fascinating stuff. We got to talk about the Oscars. I got to ask you what your top picks are and talk a little bit about that so-called Oscar bump to the bottom line. We're going to be back in just a moment. We'll have more with Edward Jay Epstein right after the break. Back now with Edward Jay Epstein and talking about what to expect at this Sunday's Academy Awards, as well as the current state of sort of film profitability. And let's just talk about who you expect to win. A lot of people talking about the King's Speech here.
Well, I'm just like anyone else. My guess goes with the King's Speech or Social Network. But if they were giving the award for the film that would make the most money for Hollywood, Toy Story 3 would win hands down.
Is that because Disney, it was made, the studio is Buena Vista, which is owned by Disney, but is it because Disney owns most of sort of the food chain of that industry so that it's able to retain most of the profitability?
Well, it's because the movie appeals to a worldwide audience. It appeals to a television audience, a DVD audience, a toy-buying audience. It is part of a franchise, and all the money for Hollywood, and 80% of the movies they're making nowadays are franchise movies.
Franchise meaning it's not just Toy Story 1, it's Toy Story 1, 2, 3, and, you know, to infinity and beyond, I suppose. Let's talk about the Oscar bump that everyone talks about. I mean, typically when we're watching stories about it, it's really relative to an actor or an actress. But what does it mean from a studio's perspective?
Well, first of all, the movie has to be in the theaters. It's not going to make more money on television, and DVD market has sort of collapsed. So the movies that are still in the theater, like The King's Speech, will get
can see a resurgence in box office numbers.
They will get, yes, they'll earn more money. The Weinstein Company will earn more money as the American distributor. If they own foreign rights, which they don't on King's Speech, they'll be able to sell foreign rights. It's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Once it's on Netflix, who's making the money?
In Netflix?
Yeah, if a movie like A Winter's Bone I can pull up on an Apple TV, who makes that money at that point? Is any of it going back to the studio?
Yeah, sure. They have some licensing agreement, but it's very little. For a movie, for a 2-year license, is $12,000 from Warner Brothers, much less for a movie like Winter Bones. So you make a little money.
Given the economics of the movies themselves, is it easier, more profitable? Do you do better making an indie sort of film at this point, or do you still do better with a James Cameron type of film or an Inception?
You do much better with a Hollywood movie, but even worse, independent movie is a very, very difficult proposition. First, to finance, 2, to find distribution for, and 3, to earn your investment back. So indie movies is a work of love and a work of art, but not a work of profit.
How is it right now for a lot of these studios to find financing? Wall Street was once a source of financing. I don't know if that's the case any longer.
The studios can self-finance the movies because the money keeps rolling in from older movies, and from the main profit and money source for studios is selling the rights to cable television, and that money keeps flowing in the library. For independent filmmakers who have no library, who have no money flowing in, it's terribly difficult.
All right. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we have to end it there. Wish we could keep talking. Look forward to seeing you again, hopefully before the next Oscars.